Hi all, our notable game today features another amazing game of the legend Bobby Fischer. Bobby Fischer in the 1962 Varna Olympiad that was held in Bulgaria was playing against Karl Robatsch. Now Karl Robatsch has a named opening after him with an early G6 and bishop G7. So like this, which is also known as the modern defense. It's very interesting. He was experimenting with hypermodern systems. What do we know about Karl Robatsch? Well, he was born 1928. He died in 2000, 71 years old. He's Austrian. He was born in Klagenfurt. He was awarded the IM title in 1957 and the GM title in 1961. That's a year before this game. He was Austrian champion in 1960. So the Robatsch Bh6 ECO code defense is named after him. He was second at Kampfenberg in 1955, second at the Varna 1957, first at Madrid 1961, second at Weekendsie 1962, third at Hal 1963, and he had his finest moment, which is relevant to this game, at the prior Olympiad to this game, which is the Leipzig Olympiad in Germany 1960, when he won the gold medal for the best performance on first board. This was even better than Bobby Fischer's performance in the 1960 Olympiad. He passed away in 2000, sadly, after a long battle with stomach and throat cancer. In this game, we see e4, and it shows that Karl Robatsch also played the centre counter or Scandinavian defence. After e takes d5, usually Karl Robatsch will play knight f6. Maybe he wanted to surprise Fischer. He played queen takes d5. It seems out of 6 games this is the only one where he's actually played queen takes d5. We have knight c3, and often the queen goes to a5. That seems to be the most popular over the history of time, to go to a5 here. Also popular is queen d6, but the queen went back here to d8. We have d4, and now it's here it gets really quite interesting. Karl Robatsch, I think, generally had an interest in fianchettoed bishops and hypermodern style of play. He played a cheeky hybrid idea here. It's like mixing two different ideas, the Scandinavian, which does lose a bit of time. Now with this fianchetto, this is quite rare, g6 in this position. In Olympiad, knight f6 is played here, or c6. But g6 seems, you could argue, it's a little bit slow. It's also creating some dark square weaknesses. Now, Fischer showed in this game that actually he really wants to expose Black's lack of development. What he does now is very, very interesting. It's very direct, this next move. Not non-stereotypical. Maybe normal like players will just play knight f3 and let Black get on with things, you know, maybe h3, bishop c4. But Fischer plays bishop f4. And you might think, is this actually is this actually really good? What is it doing? It's actually preparing to play quickly queen d2 and castles. There's a slight snag with it though, surely. There's a snag here with this approach, which does try and rob Black of the defensive fianchetto bishop. Surely Black just plays bishop g7, and the snag is d4 is hit. Now the problem here is that knight f3 could be met perhaps with a pin in the future, bishop g4, but Fischer actually plays a different move in this position, which highlights some development issues of the Black position, and the king, which is reminded, is still in the centre. The Black king's still in the centre. Can you guess the move that Fischer plays here, which seems in many ways more accurate than the standard looking knight f3? So if I give you 5 seconds here, what would you play as white? Okay, and it seems to have taken up popularity as the main move in this position in live book. It's queen d2. Just letting the d pawn go here. It's pretty dangerous. If Black takes this, Black played knight f6, but if he took it with the queen, then queen takes, bishop takes. And the problem here might actually be, the most accurate move might actually be knight d5. Just first thing, knight takes c7. And if knight a6, then we can just snap that off. So this is a big problem. If black has to play bishop b6, then this is an advantage for white. Bishop takes c7, can double black's pawns and win a pawn. That's a nice position to have from the opening. A pawn up. So this seems too dangerous to play queen takes d4. And you might think bishop takes d4, it's even worse. Castle queenside. In this position, Fischer is setting up a battery against d8, which means bishop takes c3. We can just play actually queen takes d8, rather shockingly, while the king's still in the centre. So yeah, very, very dangerous. Casting queenside here, setting up the automatic battery. And also, if c5, knight b5, threatening knight c7 check. So knight a6, c3. Oh dear, this is very unpleasant indeed. And that pin on d8. So yeah, already it seems Fischer has secured something very, very interesting. Robatsch, who likes his fianchetto bishops and has an entire opening system named after him, which is also called the modern defense, has tried to mix this hybrid of the Scandinavian defense with the fianchetto, and maybe being clinically punished for it with white's construction, which simply is designed to get rid of that bishop and expose weaknesses here as quickly as possible. Knight f6 is played and white simply castles queenside. So bishop h6, very clear plan. Black plays c6 here with the idea of maybe queen a5 or b5 later is useful for some sort of counter attack. Bishop h6 immediately is played and black castles. Now a normal attacking player would just consider h4 here. Why? Well, that is what was played because white just wants to deliver checkmate as quickly as possible. It's as simple as that in this position. You can imagine knight takes, rook takes, pawn takes, queen g5, end of game. Basically, there'll be no defense on g7. Let me just show you that as an example. Say black played queen a5, but say knight d7, h5. We just snap this off. We open up that g file, queen g5. There's no defense of g7. Black will be mated next move. Black has to tread carefully. He plays queen a5. He's looking at the g5 square here at least, as well as h5 a bit. And it seems also it might promise some counter-attack in the future. You never know. It's interesting to note that h4 was also recommended by Fischer against the move 1 g6 in modern d4 bishop g7. Fischer was recommending in its annotation against Pavlenko h4. So he loves the idea of just blasting the fianchettos with an h-pawn attack. So okay, he plays h5. Yes, open up the lines. Now here it's very, very dangerous for black. If black plays knight takes h5, then okay, not rook takes, the queen's on it, but bishop e2 in this position. And this is so dangerous for black. If black ever retreats, then taking queen here, this is going to be extremely dangerous. Knight g5, knight takes h7 ideas. The black king is really kind of defenseless. So yeah, after h5, knight takes h5, bishop e2, that's the key move. This would be extremely dangerous. Extremely dangerous. If knight d7, g4, we can take this off. Finish up bishop, check, play g5 again. And again, there's major issues. The bishop's ready to snap off the knight. h7 is the problem. There's no defense. Look at black's pieces. So anyway, after h5, a radical defensive measure was tried. G takes h5. So already things are looking pretty critical. The problem with this, the structure has been fragmented. H7 is more visible to white, more of an attacking pawn to be attacked with bishop d3. So Fischer takes his time with bishop d3. Okay, there's no immediate sacrifice. Can't immediately use g5, knight bd7. But now knight ge2 betrays the idea knight g3, maybe coming into f5 or just taking on h5 in the future. But f5 would seem an ideal place for a knight. Rook d8. Now interestingly here, knight g3, there might be a slight issue with knight f8 putting up a defensive posture. Fischer actually plays a much more violent move in this position than what was kind of implied by knight g2, as though knight g3 plays a much more violent move at move 13. Guess what Fischer plays in this position? If I give you 5 seconds, starting from now. Okay, g4, yeah, it opens up the lines. Pawn sack. If black takes it, it's really filled with a bit of venom. Black played knight f8. If black plays knight takes g4, white could take on g7, then play f3 simply. If the knight goes back, check. Queen h6 threatening queen g7 mate. Here, rook takes, king takes, check. And black's getting forcibly mated here. If king h8, queen g7, and if knight g4, that actually leaves the weakness of the last move. h7 is not protected. So queen takes h7 is again mate here. Pretty brutal stuff. On knight takes, if we look at this again, here you might think knight f2 doesn't really help. Check, check, yes, doesn't help at all. Rook takes h5, even better, like hitting the queen. Then even taking there, it's all pretty crushing. Absolutely crushing. And on pawn takes, let's have a look at this. Bishop takes, queen check. So Fischer's got a point. The weakened squares around the king. Just bishop takes h7 is blasting black away. So yeah, g4, scary stuff. Black plays knight f8, trying to hold on for dear life. G takes h5. Unfortunately, the g file pretty dangerous here, even more dangerous than that h file now. Knight e6 is played. Rook dg1. Nasty pin on the bishop. Black unpins. Bishop takes g7. The queen comes in, installs herself there. Threatening mate. Rook g8. Rook g5 gaining a critical tempo on the queen. The queen goes back. Black's in a fully defensive posture here, and white has the luxury of doubling. It's always nice to double rooks. Threatening rook takes g7. Now here, the most stubborn defense is to actually protect the knight. It's very passive, but that would be the most stubborn way of playing this position. Black just collapsed here. Maybe distraught. He played knight f5, which just loses in this position. The idea is protecting g7 for a moment. So if rook takes g8, knight takes g8. Black's not getting immediately mated because the knight's protecting g7. But Fischer has another move here. Can you guess? If I give you 5 seconds, starting from now. So the clue is it's not rook takes g8, it's, yep, just take the knight. This is a big problem, very big problem. Black resigned here. If takes, check, and if you don't want to lose the queen, you get mated on g7. Black gets mated on g7. So yeah, that's pretty hopeless. If rook takes, we're just taking here, threatening this. So we just won a piece. Let's have a look at the most stubborn defense instead of knight f5, which is queen f8. Fascinatingly, on engine inspection, there might not be a quick knockout blow here, and maybe, you know, from an engine point of view, there's an instructive kind of attacking move here, a polite sort of attacking move. Can you guess what white can do to just further the attack? All the pieces are readily, you know, they're installed, they're very, very aggressive against the king. Black's pretty tied down as you can get here. The knight can't move because there's things like rook takes and then queen takes h7. So black is kind of tied down. The knight's virtually pinned because of this mechanism, rook takes g8. But can you guess what the engine finds in this position on queen f8? As an attacking move, basically. If I give you 5 seconds, you might want to pause the video. So starting from now. Okay, the engine finds, fascinatingly, knight d1 as one of the most accurate moves. The idea is to go to e3. So let's have a look at this. If black does nothing, say bishop d7, knight e3, it holds the f5 square simply. And now white is ready with the other knight, knight f4. And now, after bishop e8, take time to hold the center. This is just an example continuation. You can actually just build up and then play knight g4 basically. Knight g4 with the pressure on h7 mounting here. As an example. Just to take on f6 and then mate on h7. If knight e6 here, pardon me, rook takes, yes, it's devastation. Yeah, as an example. But yeah, knight d1, believe it or not, in this continuation with queen f8. I'll just show you this absolutely to make sure. Some other ideas. Black's just in such a passive state, but this is given us the best defensive try. In fact, white's position is really strong. It's not just knight d1, but knight d1 is fascinating as well as d5 is given. Knight d1, if bishop f5, then we can just take here and just win a piece because our rook is protected there. So forget this bishop f5, but say black didn't do bishop f5, try to hold on to material. Then this knight coming to e3 kind of seals black's counterplay up. And we have this just knight f4 coming in as mentioned. Say black does nothing. In fact here there's other moves as well. Bishop takes h7 is crushing. If takes, check. This is an embarrassing situation where black's defenseless on h7. So yeah, it seems black's position here is overloaded. Even if queen f8 was played, it's completely overloaded position. There's like multiple kind of virtual pins, actual and well relative pins on the pressure on h7 and g8 in particular is quite notable. So yeah, Fischer used that early move, queen d2, may have caught Karl Robatsch by surprise. So his fianchetto, his beloved fianchetto, was under early assault. And then the crude h4, which Fischer even loves against the modern generally. He's made a statement in an annotation against Pavlenko. He likes to play h4, h5. He actually made that as a third move recommendation, apparently. So we get this quick h-file attack with white castling queenside. It would seem to be made simple and crude and effective. That's the key word. Simple but crude but effective. It just ties black up in knots basically. We end up with these multiple pins where white can simply just build up a little bit of pressure and black will crack really pretty soon after that. Once the knight heads to f4, we've got things like bishop takes h7 and knight g6. So using the pin on the h7 pawn. So yeah, an interesting game. Very simple on the surface, but if you look, black was put on the back foot very, very early on. Just from a little bit of experimentation, trying to get this hybrid between the Scandinavian and and the fianchetto, which an early one would be the Robatsch or modern defence, that experiment seemed to go very badly wrong here. But as mentioned, Karl Robatsch generally is an Olympiad player. He had his Olympiad tournament performance of his life 2 years earlier in the Leipzig Olympiad. He won the gold medal above Fischer for the best performance on first board. So, yeah, a great player, especially at Olympiads. So I hope this game doesn't show the worst of him. He's actually a great player, and as many of Fischer's opponents, I think it's worth checking out their Olympiad games where they've done stunningly well to shed them in a much better light than some of these games could portray. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.